Good morning, adventurers. My name is Ben, and welcome to a morning show where I sit around, drink some tea, and talk about D&D. Ugh, sorry about that. First up for T&D today, we have my lovely Cable Knit sweater mug, which I like a whole lot. I wish that I kept things a little bit warmer, given that it is a sweater, but it does not, because it is not a real sweater. It is just ceramic. And inside of it, I think you can probably hear it in my voice a little bit. I have some of the Yogi Throat Comfort tea for the reasons that you will hear as I speak, I'm sure, because I've been doing a lot of talking very loudly recently. Also, I just like the way it tastes. I know every time I have it, I'm like, my throat feels a little funky. There is that, but also I do just generally actually like the way that it tastes. So, good times. So, getting into it, what we are talking about today, building off of what we talked about yesterday, which was what your ability scores sort of represent. We're talking today about what they actually mean, like how to interpret these numbers that you're given between 1 and 20, or 1 and 30 technically. I'm going to get this out of the way ahead of time because I know that somebody's going to be upset about it with me for some reason. This is the way that I interpret the scores, okay? This is my interpretation of it, the way that I have always thought about these, not the way that you or your cousin Mark thinks about it. I don't know why Mark, just because. Sorry, Mark, if you are out there, but thanks for watching the show, I guess. But we're going with mine because this is my show. I do what I want here. So I am going to be talking about the way that I interpret these scores, which I don't think is a super uncommon way. Like, to be clear, I think that it's not a far leap to say that, like, this is how somebody would interpret these scores. But I do know people that make a slightly different argument that I'll get into in just a second here. So the way ability scores, obviously we talked about what they represent yesterday. The functional numbering of them ranges from 1 to 30, if you are including monster ability scores in there, where it is possible for you to have an ability score of 0, but you're dead then. Every effect in the game that reduces an ability score to 0 kills you outright as well. So we're going to ignore 0 as part of this whole thing. And realistically, player characters, unless they are under a specific effect, will not have an ability score below 3. Because if you have one that is below 3, your stat generation method is funky. And honestly, I kind of want to know about it. But given the more traditional 4d6 drop the lowest or 3d6, it is impossible to get below 3. Not the point. Player characters exist on the scale between 3 and 18 as they're sort of like bases that they can roll up for themselves, essentially. And that is an important thing to keep in mind here. Yeah, I think that's everything that we've got there. So, brief overview before we talk about the specific stats themselves. Because there is this 3 to 18 sort of range, that puts our middle right down the center, quite literally, at like 10.5. And 10.5 is what you get when you roll 3d6 and take the average of every single one of them. And because you can't have a half, that puts you between 10 and 11, which is the plus 0 for your modifier. The Player's Handbook will tell you, I believe it's in the Player's Handbook, will tell you that 10, 11 is human average, essentially. And I think that's important, and it is where, in my mind, the vast majority of the population is going to sit. They're going to sit in that 10 to 11 range, right? For pretty much all of these. If you are better than someone at something in your day-to-day life, you're probably not going up a full category. You're probably trending more towards the 11 or more towards the 10, as opposed to what that other person is. If you are like well trained in it and stuff like that, then you'll start jumping categories. But that you're probably mostly going to be sticking around the 10 to 11, which is what makes these magical hero people so special. Which is also what I think the reason that I interpret it in the way that I do, it really sort of emphasizes that these people who are these heroes are effectively superhuman. Because I have heard many arguments all over the internet of people who talk about how, like, 20, which is the player character max, without some kind of special outside effect, is like this like peak Olympic level athlete kind of thing. Like that is the absolute pinnacle of human capacity. You would be the best in the world at that. But I don't disagree, but I do disagree in that you are the best in your ability to do whatever it is you're doing if you have a 20 in one of your scores. However, I think in my mind, Olympic level athletes are sitting in the 16 to 17 range, and the ones that are like a cut above the rest are in the 18 to 19 range, with 20 being an unattainable thing for your average person. And by average person, I mean literally any mortal person in our real world. When you've got your, like, Simone Biles, she's going to be in the 18, 19 range, because she is doing things that people simply cannot do, which is also true then for every other Olympic athlete in the world with relation to a more normal person, or maybe just like a professional as opposed to like a peak professional. And so it sort of scales down in that direction for me. Because I like to treat my player characters as superhuman, because it makes it more entertaining then. They are the ones that are able to figure out things that no one else possibly can, or do things that no one else possibly can. So anyway, all that said, let's go ahead and let's get into what our each of these individual scores actually breaks down to be. I'm going to try and get through this relatively quick. I went long yesterday. I don't want to do that again. But also it's my show. I can do what I want. Sue me. I don't know. Don't sue me. Please don't sue me. I don't think I'm doing anything wrong. So anyway, starting off with our strength score, here we have a strength score. As I mentioned, you're sort of pacing it out in such a way that, like, 10 to 11, perfect human average, like you're totally normal person, and so on and so forth, with your Olympic level people being in the 16 to 17 range. Now, strength is interesting because strength is also the only one that you can actually, like, do math to kind of figure out, which is funny because that feels like it should be intelligence. But like the player's handbook hands you calculations to do to help, like, figure out actual strength scores. They have stuff that is based in your like physical abilities that are based in your strength, like carrying capacity, lift ability, push ability, jumping, that sort of thing. And they don't really make a lot of sense when applied to regular people because of how it is. And so that is why my sort of category exists the way that it does. Because in theory, at least, an average-sized person, a medium creature, will top out with a carrying capacity of 600 pounds. And that is if they're, like, fully encumbered, everything like that. Yeah, most people don't use encumbrance rule. Not really going to worry about that. But like, that is a calculation that you can do for your strength score in the player's handbook. But it doesn't account for people going over 600 pounds. I believe the lift, the lift, there we go, is actually what you can do with the 600 pounds. Like, the most a player character can lift is 600 pounds, which is just, that's not true. Like, there are people in the world who can lift a lot more than that. There are people who have lifted well over 1,000 pounds. I say well over. I'm pretty sure it's at least 100 pounds over that, but I'm not positive. And their carrying capacity is 300 pounds. And that is significant. 300 pounds, like, on your back to just be able to walk around, that's crazy. 600 pounds as, like, the grand total you can lift if you have maxed out strength, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Additionally, while 600 pounds, don't get me wrong, immensely impressive to be able to lift 600 pounds. I'm not disparaging that at all. But the current world record or the current Olympic record for high jump is less than 8 feet. But a character with a strength score of 20 can jump 8 feet in the air. on a 10-foot run up, which is what you get with high jump. So like, it's kind of all over the place. But that is the category that I'm thinking you are going to be in. You are going on my scale. You are passing Olympic level athletes at the 16-17. In the 18-19, you're getting those people that are holding those world records. Like, oh god, I can't remember what his name is. The Mountain. He plays the Mountain. The guy that holds that current world record for deadlift, I believe it is. And at 20, you're doing those things, but more. You're doing crazy, insane things. The same goes for the opposite direction on the scale. As you become weaker and weaker, you become more and more frail, less and less able to lift things, down to where you are likely going to be some kind of almost physically disabled if you are getting down to like the 1 range, or because you're going to be beginning to struggle to hold up your own body at a certain point, really. Now, that doesn't mean you can't make a character that is incredibly effective at those lower scores, but that is what your strength actually kind of represents. Moving on from strength, we go away from numbers, which is hilarious. And we go to dexterity. Dexterity, obviously, the measure of how nimble, quick, that sort of thing you are. These are going to be your... these are like your gymnasts, even though I'm not saying that gymnastics doesn't also require insane amounts of strength, because it does. But these are going to be your gymnasts. These are going to be like almost your sleight of hand artists that you find on the street and stuff like that. And then your people. So your people are going to be the 10 to 11, obviously. Somebody who's like particularly clumsy might go down from there, and so on and so forth, all the way down to somebody who basically can't walk in a straight line for one reason or another. And then going up from the average person, you've got like your street artists that will like do the 3 cups and a ball trick, maybe even like close-up magic, where they're like doing a lot of very specific things. That is obviously specifically the sleight of hand kind of dexterity. Dexterity is a really wide category in this one. Because then you've also got, 16 to 17 range, you've got your Olympic gymnasts, the super, like, almost like Cirque du Soleil type acrobats that you've got in there. Up to, at the 18-19 range, your Simone Biles type people who are effectively revolutionaries in their domain, their, like, athletic, acrobatic abilities. Up to 20, where, again, I would have player characters being so impossibly dexterous in whatever it is they're trying to do, that they are outperforming those type of people, like the people who are already so far above the rest that it's almost inconceivable for people to be above them. And that again, superheroes. These people, you're playing superheroes. You can play your game how you want to, but like most of the time, it's kind of like to be this ultra powerful individual. So that's what I like to try and pump into there for them. Moving on from dexterity, we have our... I'm in the wrong page, but I should just know these. Constitution. Constitution is another one where you can kind of do numbers, but also you can't really do numbers, because the world record for holding your breath is like 24 minutes or something like that, which is ludicrous. But the most you can hold your breath in 5th edition D&D, 6 minutes, unless you have a special kind of buff to that. And so it's one of those where it is kind of difficult to figure out, I guess, to a certain degree. But I look at Constitution in this capacity more as endurance than as like a specific set of things. And coming up with the people in this category was very difficult to me. So this is going to be a little bit all over the place, but stick with me here. Starting at your center point, you've got obviously average people. Going down from there, you've got people who I have in here as maybe people who get sick easily, maybe motion sickness, something like that, something that, sort of triggers that sort of not greatness. Down further and further to people who are more and more almost immunocompromised as the people who would fall lower on that scale. That doesn't mean they're not necessarily healthy or have good endurance, but things that can affect them physically like that, that's kind of where they fall more in my head. And then on the flip side of that, going up in Constitution, you've got people who obviously get sick less often. I have down here competitive eaters as one of the examples for Constitution that they give in the book is the ability to down, let's see, what is it? Quaff an entire stein of ale in one go. So similar kind of concept, at least, like consuming large amounts of something very quickly. So competitive eating in there, in my head. They weirdly are kind of near the top because the only people higher than that I have on this list here are like Olympic distance runners or like world competition distance runners. The people who will run like, you know, dozens and dozens of miles to do something. Triathletes, Ironman competitors, that sort of thing. And then up to, you know, your top people, and by top people I mean your adventurers, who are just surpassing that. Okay, moving on from Constitution, because that one feels it feels weird at best. Intelligence, I feel a little bit more confident about. Intelligence, obviously, as mentioned yesterday, like mental sharpness, and by mental sharpness I mean like critical, like analysis type of mental sharpness. This one is it is not about the world around you. It is about what is going on inside of that head of yours. And so people often will try and equate like IQ to this, which is fair. It is one of the ways to figure it out, but it feels like a cop-out to me in a lot of different ways. And I don't really know how to explain that. This one was pretty easy to figure out, people going up and down, honestly. Going down is just you can't solve problems as easily, can't retain information as well, and are maybe not particularly good in like the more like rote history, math, science, like almost numbers based things. But then going up, you've got like college professors, presumably, hopefully, like teachers and professors would be, you know, good at these things. You've got your educators going up from there. You've got like professional mathematicians. Honestly, in here I even have like professional chess players, because that's more about like the intersectionality of the problems and everything like that. Up past that, I have like inventors and people who solve those kind of problems. So you've got that, which fits with, you know, like artificer and honestly wizard with mathematicians, because they do like arcane equations. Artificer like builds whatever. Your like peak human performance on this one are going to be like your Teslas, your Edison, that kind of thing, and then a rung above them are your adventurers. And I'm going to leave it at that for that one. Wisdom is next. Wisdom was both easy and difficult to figure out simply because it is what it is. Wisdom is more like your interaction with the world around you, almost. Your people who are like perceptive and almost more empathic than like analytical. So going down, you start stacking traits like obliviousness and inability to read people, inability to read situations, which all of those things fall under obliviousness. Not the point. Going up from there, I have down that you have, and this is kind of a crossover with intelligence, but you're going to have to stick with me on it, like your psychologist and psychiatrist, where it's about like interfacing with people, that sort of thing. Honestly, I've got salespeople on here because they have to be able to like read situations and like adapt to figured that out. They're also on my charisma list, but whatever. And then there's not like professionally, well, there are professionally like empathic people as your psychiatrist, that sort of thing. But like there aren't like professionally perceptive people. Like that's not really a job so much. And so that is when you start to get into the more like ethereal, heady range of like your Dalai Lamas, Gandhis, that sort of thing. Like the people who are at least supposed to be these like almost mythic figures where they are more in tune with the world and that sort of thing. And then, of course, above them, you've got your heroes when they get to that 20. Other notable thing in there that I just sort of skipped over for some reason are like philosophers, potentially. There's a pretty wide variety of philosophers, but like it could be. And so finally we come to our charisma. This one feels like it should be pretty straightforward. But it is important to remember that I said yesterday that this is specifically about force of personality as opposed to just being like hot or something like that. And so as you go backwards down the scale, you might start to lose things like confidence, your ability to articulate yourself. You might begin to add in things like performance anxiety, stage fright, that sort of thing. And going up, obviously you are doing the opposite of those, being comfortable in front of people, being comfortable presenting yourself, being comfortable talking. This is where you start to get your actors, unfortunately your politicians, salespeople, in that same sort of thing. Just sort of going up and up and up. And I didn't pick out specific people for charisma because it feels weird to be like, yes, these like actors in particular are especially charismatic. They're actors. Like their whole thing is like being able to like put on a show, portray people, that sort of thing. And so I just sort of have, this is a general thing in here. There's also not that many people who are like professionally charismatic other than your actors, your politicians, that kind of thing. So they are the ones that sort of climb that ladder all the way up. And then, of course, your adventurers at the top. I know I said a lot of the same thing over and over again through that whole thing with the whole adventures at the top thing, but I think it is important to keep reiterating that. So thank you for, sticking through all of that. But that is what I have to talk to you guys about for that specifically. Next up, our streams/shows that are happening today. We've only got 4 of them. It's Wednesday. We've got Dimension 20, Knocked Prone, Venture Maidens, and Trials and Trebuchets. Definitely go check those out. Catch up on other things that have been coming out, please, because there's so many good D&D shows out there. I highly recommend you guys going ahead and checking out the ones that are out and around. But with all that said, that is everything I have to talk to you guys about today. Thank you so much for making me part of your morning routine. I really do appreciate it. And thank you so much in particular to my patrons. You guys are the ones that make this show possible. If you're interested in becoming a patron, there's a link to that in the description of this episode. But that is all of it. So don't forget, drink tea, play D&D, and until next time, keep on rolling.